My grandson called me a burden the morning of his wedding rehearsal dinner. Not to my face. He said it to his fiancée in the kitchen, thinking I couldn't hear from the hallway. She's going to embarrass us, he said. She smells like a laundromat. I stood there in my good blouse, the navy one I'd ironed twice, and I didn't move for a full minute. Then I walked back to the guest room, sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my hands. These hands had folded other people's laundry for 41 years. I didn't cry. I'd stopped crying about things like that sometime around 1987. The next morning, before anyone else was awake, I drove to First Federal Bank on Garland Avenue and asked to speak with a private banking advisor. The young man behind the desk, couldn't have been older than 25, looked at me the way people always did. Old woman, Tuesday morning, sensible shoes. He smiled the way people smile when they're calculating whether you're worth their time. Then he pulled up my account. His smile didn't disappear. It just changed into something else entirely. "Mrs. Aldridge," he said carefully, setting down his pen, "I need to bring in our regional manager. Would you mind waiting just a moment?" I told him I had all morning, but let me go back, because you need to understand what that envelope meant before you can understand what I did with it. My name is Iris Aldridge. I am 67 years old. For 4 decades, I ran a dry cleaning and laundry service out of a building I leased on the corner of Maplewood and Fifth in a mid-sized Ohio city where people know your name and your business and your grandmother's mistakes. I pressed wedding dresses and baptism gowns and the suits men wore to job interviews and funerals. I steamed curtains for the mayor's office 3 years in a row. I worked 6 days a week, and sometimes 7, because when you own a small business in a working-class neighborhood, the business doesn't close just because you're tired. I raised my daughter, Pamela, mostly alone. Her father left when she was 4, and I didn't have the energy to be angry about it for long. Anger cost something, and I needed every bit of myself for the work. Pamela grew up watching me press collars and check invoices and mop the floor before locking up. She did her homework on the counter in the back. She turned out fine, better than fine, for a long time. She married a decent man named Roy Whitfield, had a son named Cody, built a quiet life in the suburbs. I was proud of her. Then Roy died, a heart attack at 52 out of nowhere, and something shifted in Pamela. She remarried 2 years later. His name was Douglas Fenn. He came with money and opinions, and after the wedding, the phone calls from Pamela got shorter and the invitations got fewer. Cody was 15 then. By the time he was in college, he'd picked up Douglas's way of looking at people. Like the world was sorted into categories, and you needed to know which one someone belonged to before you decided how to treat them. I watched it happen slowly, the way you watch a plant grow wrong. You notice it, you worry, you hope you're mistaken. I wasn't mistaken. When Cody got engaged to a girl named Waverly, her family had a lake house and her father was a dentist. The wedding planning started taking up a lot of space. They chose a venue called Hartwell Manor, an event property about 40 minutes outside the city. Old money aesthetic. Brick and ivy and a stone terrace overlooking a pond. Exactly the kind of place where Waverly's mother could tell her book club about it afterward. I was invited to the rehearsal dinner because you have to invite the grandmother. I understood that. I also understood what I was. I came in my navy blouse and sat at the end of the table where I was placed, next to Waverly's great aunt who was hard of hearing and happy to talk about her garden. I was fine with that. I ate my chicken and drank my water and watched Cody across the table laugh too loudly at Douglas's jokes. He didn't look at me once during dinner. After the meal, when people were moving around with their dessert plates and their glasses of wine, I found Cody in the hallway outside the private room. I touched his arm. He flinched just slightly, but I felt it. "Grandma?" He glanced over his shoulder. "Hey, you doing okay? Getting enough to eat? The way you talk to someone you're managing." "I wanted to give you something," I said. "For the wedding." I held out the envelope. Plain white, sealed, his name written on the front in my handwriting. He took it without looking at it. "Thanks, Grandma." That's really sweet. He was already scanning the room. It's something I've been saving, I said. Sure, sure. He tucked it into his jacket pocket. Hey, I need to go check on Waverley's dad. He wanted to. And he was gone. I didn't see what he did with the envelope until 20 minutes later. I came around the corner from the restroom and saw Cody standing with Waverley and her mother, Renata. He was holding the envelope open. Renata's eyebrows were raised. Waverley's mouth had curved into the kind of smile that's not really a smile. It's a savings bond, Cody said. His voice was low, but the hallway carried sound. A paper savings bond, like from the post office, from 1987. Renata made a soft sound. How much? Waverley asked. The face value is $200. He laughed. Just a small exhale. She's been saving it for 35 years. It was probably a gift to her. She just passes things along. Cody, Waverley's voice was gentle and cruel in equal parts. You should be sweet about it. She means well. I know. He folded the envelope and pushed it into his jacket pocket. I'll handle it. She'll never know. But he was wrong. I already knew. I went back to the table, finished my decaf coffee, said goodbye to Waverley's great-aunt, and drove home in the dark. On the way, I stopped at the 24-hour Kroger and bought a container of soup I didn't eat. That night, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. The house was quiet. Just the refrigerator hum and a dog barking somewhere down the street. In the morning, before the bank, I went to my bedroom closet and moved the winter coats aside. People always assume that if a woman has money, you can see it. They assume it lives on the surface, in the car she drives, the neighborhood she chooses, the vacations she takes. What they don't understand is that some people keep money the way they keep other things they value. Carefully, quietly, away from people who might damage it. I had started putting money aside in 1984. Not a lot at first. $20 a week into a savings account that barely earned interest. But the laundry business grew, and I grew with it, and by the early 90s I was making real decisions. I bought the building I'd been leasing, then the vacant lot next to it, then a small apartment building on Crescent Street, 6 units, all occupied, cash flow positive from the first month. I hired a property manager named Al Kowalski, a retired contractor with a reputation for being honest and thorough, and I kept my name out of it. The company was called IIEuroW Properties, LLC. My initials, my company. Nobody's business. By the time Cody was laughing at my envelope in that hallway, IRP Properties held 19 buildings across 3 Ohio counties. Residential and small commercial, appraised value, the previous year, $4.8 million. The savings bond in the envelope was real. $200, matured to a little over $300 with interest. That part was true. What Cody didn't know, what he had no reason to suspect, was that it had belonged to my mother. She'd bought it from me when I was born. I kept it for 67 years because it was the first thing anyone had ever saved for me, and I'd planned to give it to him as something that meant something. He'd made it mean nothing. I sat in the parking lot of First Federal the next morning for 10 minutes before going inside. I want to be honest about that. I sat there and I thought about whether I was being foolish, whether this was grief dressed up as decision-making, whether I should go home and call Pamela instead. Then I thought about the way he said, "She'll never know." I got out of the car. The regional manager's name was Patricia Osey. She was a small, precise woman in her 50s, and she sat across from me in the private consultation room and reviewed my accounts the way a doctor reviews lab results, carefully, without giving anything away. Then she set the folder down and looked at me directly. "Mrs. Aldridge, you've had this arrangement with us for 22 years, and you've never requested a personal meeting." "No," I said. "What's changed?" "I'd like to restructure some things." We talked for an hour. At the end of it, she slid a business card across the table. If you're going to be making significant changes to your holdings, she said, you'll want an attorney who specializes in estate planning and asset protection. This is who I'd recommend. He's handled situations similar to yours. The attorney's name was Franklin Marsh. The card was cream-colored, simple type. I called him from the parking lot. He had an appointment available Thursday. The wedding was on Saturday. I went. Of course I went. I am his grandmother. And I have never in my life failed to show up for someone I love, even when they've made it clear they'd prefer I didn't. I wore the navy blouse again. I sat in the pew near the back with the cousins nobody quite remembered. When Cody came down the aisle, he was handsome and nervous, and he looked like Roy for a moment. Roy at his own wedding 30 years ago, and I felt something move through me that had nothing to do with anger. I loved him. I want to be clear about that. Loving someone and seeing them clearly are not the same thing, but they can happen at the same time. The ceremony was beautiful. The reception was held on the stone terrace at Hartwell Manor. 300 guests, a band, food I didn't recognize the names of. I sat at a table near the edge of the terrace and watched the pond catch the last of the afternoon light. Douglas found me during the cocktail hour. Iris. He sat down across from me without being invited. He had the kind of ease with himself that comes from never being told no. Good of you to come. Long drive for you? It's 40 minutes, I said. Right. He swirled his drink. Listen, about the... Cody mentioned you gave him something, a bond. That was thoughtful. It was. He smiled. You know, if you ever need anything, help managing affairs, that kind of thing as you get older, Pamela and I are happy to step in. You don't have to handle everything yourself. There it was. The real sentence, wearing the clothes of kindness. I manage fine, I said. Of course. He stood, touched my shoulder once with 2 fingers the way you touch something you've assessed and found unthreatening, and walked away. I watched him go. Then I looked out at the pond, Hartwell Manor. I had been here once before, 2 years ago. Not as a guest, as part of a real estate consortium that had looked at the property when the previous owners listed it quietly off market. We passed. The operational overhead was substantial, and the event venue market in this county was saturated, but I knew who had bought it. I pulled out my phone and sent a message to Al Kowalski. Al, can you find out the current ownership structure on Hartwell Manor, Clermont County, the event venue? Need it by Monday, he replied in 11 minutes. Already in our files, came up when we looked at it in 22. Want me to pull the full package? Yes, I wrote back. Then I put my phone away and watched my grandson dance with his new wife, and I clapped when everyone else clapped, and I left before the cake. Franklin March's office smelled like wood smoke and old paper. He was in his 60s, deliberate in the way people get when they've spent decades being careful with other people's important things. He didn't react when I laid out the situation. He listened, asked questions, made notes in a legal pad with a mechanical pencil. So you want to adjust the beneficiary designations across the portfolio, he said, and you want to do it in a way that's legally airtight. Yes. Any specific reason for the timing? I told him about the envelope, about the hallway, about she'll never know. He wrote something down. And your daughter? Pamela doesn't know the extent of what I have. She knows I own the building. She doesn't know about the rest. I paused. She married a man who talks about money the way some people talk about religion. I didn't want it to change how she looked at me. Has it? The money? Has it changed things? No, I said. Hiding it might have. I'm still working that out. Franklin nodded slowly. Here's what I'd suggest. We worked for 2 hours. By the end of it, there was a structure in place. A trust, a set of instructions, a series of documents that would take effect at my direction or at my death, whichever came first. Cody's name was on none of them. I want to be precise about something. This was not revenge. Revenge is heat. What I was doing was something cooler than that. It was clarity. I was making my intentions match reality, and reality was this. I had spent 40 years building something, and I intended for it to go to people who understood what building cost. What I did with Hartwell Manor was a separate matter. Al called me Monday afternoon. Full package is in your email. You're going to find this interesting. Hartwell Manor was owned by a holding company registered in Delaware. The holding company had two principals. One was a development firm out of Cincinnati. The other was a family LLC, and the family name on the filing was Fenn, Douglas Fenn. My son-in-law owned the venue where my grandson had just gotten married. I sat with that for a long time. I thought about the way Douglas had sat down across from me at the reception. If you ever need help managing your affairs, I thought about the consortium meeting 2 years ago when we'd passed on Hartwell Manor, and how at that same time Douglas had been telling Pamela that my little laundry business was a sweet hobby. He knew about property. He understood assets. He'd been sitting across from me for 5 years at Thanksgiving dinners, and he had been looking at me and seeing nothing. Not because I was invisible, because he decided I wasn't worth looking at carefully. That was his mistake. People make it all the time. I called Al back. "What's the operating situation?" I asked. "Is it profitable?" "Marginally. High overhead, inconsistent bookings in the off-season. They've been looking for an anchor tenant for the event space. And as someone approached with a serious acquisition offer." He was quiet for a moment. "The Delaware LLC has been in a passive holding pattern for about 8 months. Cincinnati firm did a valuation in March. They might be receptive." "I want to make an offer," I said. "Below ask. Through a new entity, not IRW. How far below?" "Far enough that they'll want to negotiate." "I want to know how serious they are." "I'll reach out this week." "Quietly, Al." "Iris," he said, with the patience of a man who has worked with me for 16 years. "When am I ever not quiet?" 3 weeks after the wedding, Pamela called me on a Sunday evening. She called every few weeks, shorter conversations than we used to have, full of surface and careful navigation. But this call was different. "Mom." Her voice was tight. Did you do something?" "With Hartwell Manor?" "What do you mean?" "Douglas got a call from his partners about the property. Someone made a lowball offer through some holding company he's never heard of, and he's upset. He thinks someone is trying to destabilize his investment. The real estate market is unpredictable," I said. "Mom." A long pause. "Pamela," I said finally, "can I ask you something?" "What?" "Did you know he owned Hartwell Manor?" "When Cody was booking venues." The silence this time was longer. "It was going to be a surprise," she said finally. "He arranged a discount for family." "Hum!" "Mom, what does that mean?" "That, It means I'm listening," she exhaled. "He's not a bad man. He likes to be in control of things. He likes to feel important." "I know. You don't like him." "I've never said that." "You don't have to say it." I let that sit. Then I said, "Pamela, I need you to come see me. Not with Douglas, just you. There's some things I should have told you a long time ago." Another pause. "Are you sick?" "No, I'm fine. I've kept too much to myself, and I'm done doing that. Can you come Saturday?" She came Saturday. We sat at my kitchen table for 3 hours. I made coffee, and I laid out the documents, and I walked her through it the way Franklin had walked me through it, slowly, piece by piece, letting it settle. She cried twice. Not dramatically, just quietly, the way Pamela does everything. "Why didn't you tell me?" she said. Not angry, genuinely asking. "Because I watched what money did to the people around it," I said. "And I didn't want it to do that to us." "Mom, I'm your daughter. I know. And I handled it wrong. I chose silence when I should have chosen trust. I'm telling you now because it's past time." She looked at the property list. 19 addresses. All of these. All of those. She picked up her coffee mug and held it with both hands. Cody doesn't know. No. Is that why the offer on Hartwell Manor? I wanted to understand Douglas's position, I said carefully. That's all that's happened so far. She looked at me. My daughter has her father's eyes and my stubbornness, and she is not, when she pays attention, easy to mislead. Mum, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. All right. Are you trying to hurt Douglas, or are you trying to protect us? I thought about it honestly. Both, maybe, but mostly the second one. She was quiet for a long moment. Then he told Cody you were a burden. Before the rehearsal dinner, I heard him say it. I know, I heard it too. Her face changed. You knew and you still came. You still came. You still sat there. You were there, I said. Cody was there. I wasn't going to let Douglas Fenn be the reason I missed it. Pamela set down her mug. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. We didn't say anything for a while. The refrigerator hummed. The dog 2 doors down barked once and went quiet. What are you going to do? She asked. I'm going to finish what I started, I said, but I wanted you to know, before it happens. What does that mean, finish it? You'll see. I'll call you when it's time. The acquisition closed 6 weeks later. I won't walk through every detail of the negotiation because real estate deals are slow and full of lawyers, and most of it happens in email threads that would bore you to tears. What matters is the outcome. Irably, Properties did not acquire Hartwell Manor. A new entity did, an LLC I had established specifically for this purpose with a name that meant nothing to anyone who didn't know my mother's maiden name. The purchase price was below what Douglas's group had paid for it. His Cincinnati partners had been ready to exit for months. The Fenn Family LLC was outvoted in the partnership structure, and Douglas did not have enough leverage to block the sale. On a Thursday morning in October, I stood in the stone entrance of Hartwell Manor and shook hands with the property manager Douglas had hired, a woman named Greta, who had kept the place running on not enough budget and too little support, and who greeted me like someone who'd been waiting for competent ownership for longer than was comfortable to admit. What are your plans for the space? She asked. I looked out at the terrace, the pond, the ivy on the brick, the stone where 300 people had stood and eaten food they couldn't pronounce, while my grandson's grandfather's savings bond was folded into a jacket pocket. I want to make it accessible, I said. Partnership rates for nonprofits, affordable rental tiers for community events, graduations, reunions, that kind of thing. Families who've never been able to afford a venue like this. Greta wrote something in her notebook. And the premium bookings? We have a full spring calendar. Those continue. The revenue supports the rest. I paused. And Greta, you're staying if you want to. Your institutional knowledge of this property is worth more than any new hire I could bring in. She looked up from her notebook. Thank you, Mrs. Aldridge. Call me Iris. Douglas called Pamela that same evening. I know because she told me afterward, and because I know Douglas. He called to tell her that a predatory buyer had stolen his investment. He used those words. He wanted her to be outraged on his behalf. Pamela listened, and then she asked him one question. Did you tell Cody's grandmother she was a burden? There was a long silence on his end. Then he said it was taken out of context. She told him she'd be staying with me for a few days. She took her overnight bag and her reading glasses, and she drove 40 minutes from the suburbs to my house on Cordell Street, and she slept in her old room. And in the morning we had coffee and eggs, and she helped me organize the filing cabinet in the 3rd bedroom, the way she used to help me organize the shop stockroom when she was 11. It wasn't fixed. I want to be honest about that too. Families don't fix in a season. There was still the fact that she'd married him, still the years of managed distance, still all the things we hadn't said when we should have said them. That doesn't dissolve over one acquisition and a long weekend, but it was a beginning. Cody called me on a Tuesday. I almost didn't answer. Then I thought about Roy. Roy at 25, earnest and unfinished and capable of better. And I picked up. Grandma. He sounded strange. Careful. Mom told me some things. About the properties. About Hartwell. Okay. Is it true? All of it. Yes. A long silence. The envelope. The savings bond. Yes. I didn't know what it was. I thought. He stopped. That's not an excuse. I know that's not an excuse. No, I agreed. I said something about you to Waverley's mom. Before the dinner. I don't know if you... I heard. The silence this time went on long enough that I could hear him breathe. Grandma, I'm sorry. I don't know when I became someone who would do that. I don't know when that became okay in my head. His voice had gone rough. It wasn't okay. I looked at the savings bond on my wall. I had framed it the week before, not as a monument to anything, just because it belonged to my mother, and things that belong to people deserve to be visible. Cody, I said, I love you. I'm always going to love you. But love isn't the same as trust, and right now I can't offer you both. I know. But I want to, I said. So here's what I'm going to ask. Come to Hartwell Manor next Saturday, not as a guest. I need someone to help Greta with a community event. Setup, breakdown, logistics, real work. 8 hours. A pause. You want me to work it? I want you to see what the place is for now. Another pause. Okay, he said. I'll be there. Don't be late. He wasn't late. He showed up in jeans and a work shirt, and he moved chairs and carried boxes, and he didn't complain once. At noon, he sat on the stone steps eating a sandwich next to a man named Al, who talked his ear off about property management, and I watched from across the terrace and thought about Roy. Roy would have liked who Cody could still become. I still live on Cordell Street, same house I've had since 1991. People drive past it every day and see a small house with aluminum siding and a flower bed that needs work, and they think what they think. That's fine. I've never needed anyone to look at my house and understand it. The laundry business on Maplewood closed last year, not because of trouble, but because I was ready. I've spent 41 years pressing other people's clothes. I've earned the right to stop. The building sold to a young couple who are opening a bakery, and I was glad for them. That corner needed something warm. The trust Franklin Marsh set up is still in place. The conditions on it are specific. There are things Cody can do and things he can learn that will change its terms over time. Not as a test, or maybe as a test, but the kind that exists to give someone a chance to pass it, not to watch them fail. Pamela knows the structure. She helped design it in the end. The savings bond is in a frame above the kitchen table. Just the bond. The plain paper certificate, a little yellowed. The $200 face value printed in government ink. My mother bought it the year I was born. She saved it for me before I existed to receive it. That's what saving looks like. When you do it right, you're saving for someone you haven't fully met yet, trusting that they'll be worth it. I think about that a lot. I also think about something a woman named Sandra Torres said to me at the Hartwell opening event back in the fall. She'd booked the terrace for her daughter's quinceañera. First time the family had ever had an event at a real venue. She found me near the pond where I'd gone to stand quietly for a moment. "Are you the owner?" she asked. "I am." "Why did you do this? Make it affordable." I thought about it. Because beautiful things should belong to everybody, I said, not just the people who already have everything. She nodded slowly. Then she went back to her daughter's party, and I stood there by the pond for another minute, listening to the music drift across the water. When people ask me now what I do, I tell them the truth. I managed a laundry business for 40 years. I own some property. I'm figuring out what comes next. They usually nod politely and look for someone more interesting to talk to. That's fine. I've been underestimated my whole life. It's one of my most useful assets. I've been thinking about what actually happened in that hallway. Not the part where Cody laughed. The part before it, the part where I handed him the envelope and he took it without looking at it. That's the moment I keep returning to, not because it hurt the most, but because it told me the most. When someone doesn't look at what you're handing them, they've already decided it isn't worth their attention. That decision didn't come from nowhere. It was built slowly over years out of small assumptions and easy shortcuts. The way Cody had learned to sort people into categories before he'd really seen them. He learned it somewhere. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth about how we become who we are. We absorb the room we grow up in. What I know from 67 years of paying attention is that life has a way of correcting those shortcuts eventually, not as punishment, more like physics. You build your understanding of the world on a false floor, and at some point the floor gives. Cody's floor gave the day Pamela told him what I'd built. I watched it happen on the phone. I could hear it in the long silence before he spoke. Something shifting, something that had been tilted finally landing level. I don't think I'm owed an apology, though I appreciated the one he gave. What I actually want is harder to ask for and harder to give. I want him to carry what he learned, not as guilt, as knowledge. There's a difference between a person who feels bad about who they were and a person who decides to become someone different. Feeling bad is easy. It's even comfortable in its own way. It lets you stay in place while looking like you're moving. Becoming different requires you to actually go somewhere. That Saturday at Hartwell Manor, when Cody showed up in work clothes and moved chairs for 8 hours without complaint, that was the beginning of somewhere. I watched him at noon, sitting on the steps with Al, eating a sandwich, listening to an old man talk about property assessments. He wasn't performing, he was just present. That matters more than people realize. And Pamela, I handled things wrong with her for a long time. I chose silence because I told myself it was protection, but protection and control can look identical from the inside. I kept her at a distance from the truth of my life. And then I was surprised when distance became her habit too. That's on me. The thing about withholding, even when you mean well, is that it teaches the people around you that some part of you isn't available to them. Eventually they stop reaching for it. What I want to say to anyone listening who spent years carrying something alone because it felt safer that way is this: the safety isn't worth it. I thought I was protecting my daughter. What I was actually doing was deciding, without her input, what she could handle. That's not protection. That's a kind of quiet arrogance, even when it comes from love. The savings bond is framed on my wall now. $200, yellowed paper, government ink. My mother saved it before I existed to receive it. That's the version of wealth I actually believe, in the kind you build in the direction of someone you haven't fully met yet, trusting that they'll be worth it. I think Cody is worth it. I think I'll find out.